Marvin Devine. I'm saying bye to all the lies and all the times you cried, saying that I wasn't right, yet I was right by your side. You manipulator, playing games, your friends commentators, and I don't know what you say about our private conversations, but it's got them hating. Thanks to all the rumors you be claiming, it's cool, I'm done with you, so they can throw you a celebration. You gon' hate it when you see me with somebody living better. I'm trying to tell you that me just doing me gon' have you jealous.
Hello, folks. Welcome back to the program on a Tuesday morning, the 3rd of February, 2026. Gosh, 4 or 5 years after the outbreak of foot and mouth disease in South Africa, and at least 15, 16 months since many of us recognized it publicly and said, what's going on? And gosh, approaching a year since I invited the Minister of Agriculture on my program, and he agreed to come on my program, and he did not. Then he didn't show up. He promised to come on again later on. He didn't show up the second time. Yet I saw him on a channel this week with 17 views, apparently 122,000 subscribers, not enough to entice the Minister of Agriculture to come on a program to discuss what the government is doing about foot and mouth disease. But we have, once again, a frequent flyer on the program, Theo de Jager, who's here from SAAI, talked to us a little bit about this crisis, this calamity in South Africa. If I call it a crisis, a calamity, Theo, am I exaggerating? Am I embellishing at all? How are you doing?
Thank you for inviting me again, Chris. It's really a privilege. Man, if you ask me this question, I wish I could have bottled this experience of having farmers in my office literally crying, wives and children of farmers calling to say, we are concerned about dad. He might commit suicide. He's a 4th generation farmer. We have a very proud tradition and a very unique beef cattle or dairy cattle that comes through the generations with us, these unique genes, and now everything is gone. We actually started up a special program to do counseling with farmers, but the economic disaster is already irreparable. Literally thousands of farmers who are financially in dire straits because they are out of business. If you pick up this disease on your farm, you are by law compelled to report it. And if you do, they put you in quarantine for 14 months. And what kind of business can survive for 14 months without selling anything? You have all the expenses and you don't have any of the income. And this is what is really making this a national disaster.
Theo, this is a problem that affects not just large-scale commercial ranchers and farmers, but also artisanal, small-scale, traditional herders and such. It affects the gamut because it's all cloven-hooved livestock, is it not?
It affects from the smallest, the owner of 1 or 2 cattle, up to our big mega farmers. Somehow it seems that the indigenous breeds are less vulnerable to this, whilst the dairy cattle is much more vulnerable to this. And for the first time ever, we also pick it up in wildlife. We know that in the endemic areas, the buffalo would always be a carrier. In the rest of the countries, the so-called clean buffalo, they are called clean buffalo because they are not the carriers of this virus. But now it has spread. And we still do not have a plan for wildlife. And as you know very well, since you are a frequent visitor and you've spent a large part of your life here, you'll know that we farm wildlife wherever we can. We have it in all 9 provinces. We have buffalo now in all 9 provinces. But for the first time, we pick it up in the large antelope too, in kudu, and even pigs died from it. So it's going to be, it will require more than just the current strategy to vaccinate all the cattle to get to a stage where we can with confidence say that we are a foot and mouth free country again.
Well, Taylor, what are the challenges about this, which has gotten no press whatsoever? I've seen no analysts, no one talk about this whatsoever, is that this also is an issue for your neighboring states. I know Botswana takes foot and mouth disease very seriously. When I lived there, anytime the cattle were rustled by Zimbabweans, if they got to the border, they were considered lost. They would not be allowed to re-enter the country. The police would not chase them into Zimbabwe to recover the cattle, and the government would compensate those ranchers and farmers. That's how serious they take it. You have the foot dips everywhere. I went in Botswana. You have the road crossings by the fence lines that you go through for the dip. This is something to take very seriously. I haven't heard anything about Namibia or Botswana being upset or taking measures to protect themselves against the spread of this into the countries. Botswana, of course, relies heavily on exports of beef to the European Union. Last time I checked, about $200 million a year, which is pretty significant for a small country like that. Have the neighboring states, of course, I know in Zimbabwe this is pretty endemic. Are the neighboring states making any noise? Has this been a concern? Have you heard? Because I know you cover more than just South Africa with your organization. Is this something that people in Botswana and Namibia are terrified about as well?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. They've shut their borders to us. Even Zimbabwe did. And the fact that Botswana and Namibia can both export to the EU, they can meet all the standards. They can prove that they have proper handles on the management of foot and mouth. And we cannot. I cannot explain to you how much it angers us. Why would their governments be able to manage foot and mouth and we can't? Why should we import our vaccines from Botswana and we cannot produce it ourselves? We were the leading country of both producing and managing foot and mouth vaccines and exporting it in Africa. And we lost that capacity somewhere around 2006, 2007. And our parliament took note of the growing problem at our government-owned manufacturer, OBP, Onderstepoort Producten. And they budgeted already in 2012 for R500 million to beef up our facilities. But that money got lost. No one knows where it went to. And this is partly to blame for the position we are in at the moment. And although the current minister vouched to get on the trail of this money that got lost, when he became minister nearly 2 years ago, or 18, 19 months ago, we haven't heard any progress on looking for that money. But where we are now, we have to import our vaccines, not only from Botswana, but also from Turkey and from Brazil. And we were hoping, as farmers, that we would see government taking it very serious, that we need to find the shortest route between vaccine manufacturers and our cattle on the farms. And that route is a private route. There is no way we can allow the vaccines to get imported through government, go into cool storage in our government facilities, and then be distributed to farms and being applied to the cattle through government veterinarians, state veterinarians. And yet we hear a lot of commitment of public-private partnerships, but exactly the opposite is happening here. Only last night, we got word that the vaccine manufacturer in Latin America notified their local agents that government has forced them to work with government only. And we are terrified as farmers of being delivered to the incompetency of the Department of Agriculture.
Well, there's a whole lot of stuff to unpack here, Theo. Let me just add a couple of things and get your take on this. First off, my recollection is that Onderstepoort was a world-class vaccine manufacturing facility that led the way in this disease. It is endemic in the region. And so they were on top of this for decades under the National Party and briefly under the ANC even. And then, so I believe that's true, and you can comment in the moment. But then the question becomes, around 2006, how did this capability get lost? And at what stage did they sell the intellectual property from making this to a firm in Botswana, and why did they do that? And then who bears the blame for this? Now, I think you might have alluded to this. My question is, if this had disappeared around 2006, why weren't ranchers and farmers up in arms for the last 20 years? But it sounds like there was a plan in place, money allocated to it, and like so much in South Africa, the money just disappeared. So was it a world-class institute? Did they in fact sell the intellectual property? Any idea why they did it? And are farmers partly to blame for not coming up with a solution to this?
Yes, we did have the leading manufacturing capacity in Africa, and we last manufactured vaccines around 2007 because we ran out of capacity, both in terms of the facilities, the equipment, but also in terms of the expertise and the experience. You must remember that senior government officials in South Africa are being appointed through a cadre deployment committee of the ANC. And it's definitely not for their ability to do the job or for their experience. It's for their loyalty to a party. And this is where things really went wrong. I don't know whether the intellectual property rights have been sold to Botswana. I do not know who developed the BVI, the Botswana vaccine. I only know that this is not the best of vaccines around. It is a water-based vaccine, and we use it in South Africa to vaccinate cattle which is in line to be slaughtered. So we have this distinction between vaccinating to live and vaccinating to be slaughtered. So this vaccine, the BVI from Botswana, mostly goes to the feedlots. But the vaccines which we then got approval for, the Turkish vaccine and the Brazilian vaccine, we were very excited about it. Not only because they are both oil-based, so you only need to vaccinate once a year. And it is a much better proven vaccine. I mean, we are not the first country to encounter this problem. We only need to vaccinate 14 million cattle now. In Brazil, they had close to 300 million cattle to vaccinate. And they won the battle against this virus with this vaccine. So what was most exciting for us as farmers is the fact that there are local agents for both the Turkish and the Latin American vaccines. So we had this expectation that we could find the shortest route by importing it from the manufacturer to the local privately owned agents through to private veterinarians. And the state's role being this being a government-controlled disease, the state's role would be to monitor, to know exactly how many vaccines come in and which ampule is being used on which cow or which bull. And it's not rocket science to monitor that digitally. But now it seems that government wants to control every single step in the value chain. They want to be the sole importer. They want to put it in their cool storage facilities. They want to do the distribution across the country. They want to determine which farmer will be vaccinated next. They want their veterinarians to do the job. And we know that they don't have the capacity. I mean, Chris, these are the very same officials who got us into this mess in the first place. Now they expect us to trust those same officials to lead us out of it. Farmers are very skeptical about it.
Well, not just farmers. I think a lot of folks are really skeptical about what's going on here in so many aspects of South Africa. The very people who lead you into disaster are the ones who are expected to fix it. In this case, it seems odd to me. You know, I was a dairy farmer. You know that, Theo. I used to have jerseys. And we vaccinated our livestock through our local veterinarian, who was a private business that, you know, we contacted, got the best vet, come out, we paid them to do that. It was not under the government's control. Now, understandably, this disease that can rapidly spread, so quarantine would be something the government would have a role enforcing. But why the government has to interject itself in the value chain and be the sole provider of the vaccine, the sole distributor of it, when it's clear that the government isn't capable of doing this? I mean, regardless of who the Minister of Agriculture is, this disaster is now of epic proportions. And it's interesting that you mentioned Brazil with 300 million head of cattle won this battle. But South Africa with, if you go back to the first signs of this about 4 years ago, and now at least 15 months ago that we've known that this has been serious, we just now get a plan. There's a plan now, and the plan it's a plan for a decade. What cattle will be left by then? What farmer will be left by this? This is it seems to me the height of incompetence, or is it? I don't want to play conspiracy theorists here, but it almost seems like it's a planned destruction of the farming sector. I mean, between expropriation without compensation, false land claims, land invasions, murders on farms, terrorism taking place against rural farmers, black, white, and brown, and now this nonsense. Or is it simply incompetence and greed? Any ideas?
Yes, there's something which you did not mention on your list. You see, the government hides behind the arrangement in the World Organization for Animal Health that says this must be a state-controlled disease. But they understand control, that government is involved in every step of the way. And this was not the case in Brazil. They've won the battle against foot and mouth because the farmers had the opportunity to vaccinate their own cattle, and thereby exponentially stretch the capacity to get the vaccines into the animals. So we have asked, along with a few other organizations, such as Sakeliga, Organization for Business People, and Free State Agriculture, which is actually an affiliation of Agri-SA, but which fell out of step with the mother body. We could not find anything in law or in the regulations prohibiting farmers to vaccinate their own cattle. And we got our lawyers to sit together, and they confirmed that they cannot find anything. So we asked the minister, please tell us what in law or regulation do you found your position on to say that we're not allowed to do it ourselves? And knowing that he has ignored us before on very important issues, we said to him, should you choose to ignore our request, we will have to approach a court of law and ask them to clarify. But of course, he chose to ignore us. And now we are on our way to ask a court. And when we sat with the lawyers, arguing this thing from every angle we could, the question came, why would this minister coming from the DA, which is actually a more liberal party, why would he choose the route of centralization of power, this extreme centralization of power? And the answer you can find in the numbers. You see, we know that he allowed some of the organized agricultural structures, such as the red meat industry services and the commodity organization for dairy, Milk South Africa, the milk producers organization, to buy vaccines for around 60 Rand per shot. Then we spoke to the local agents of the Turkish and the Brazilian manufacturers, and they told us they could land it on our farms for anything between 50 and 55 Rand a shot. But the day before Christmas, the Department of Agriculture issued a media statement saying that farmers must brace themselves for 300 Rand a shot. Now, where would the difference go? Into whose pocket would that land up? You want to know what's wrong in this system? Just follow the money. Already we heard the Director General saying we have to put it out on tender. My God, which tenderpreneur would have the laboratories accredited to handle this kind of vaccines in these volumes?
Well, the entrepreneurs can't fix potholes. How could they possibly expect to do something this complicated? Not going to happen. But it gets even worse than that, Theo. I've read multiple sources that indicate that this vaccine, not the one coming from Turkey or the one coming from Brazil, but like the one that's being used in Namibia and in Botswana, can be had for as little as 17 Rand a dose. And they're talking about you paying as much as 300 Rand. Clearly, something untoward is happening here, and this is obviously part of the problem.
One of the local agents for the vaccines, the one who had a contract with the manufacturer in Brazil, got a letter only last night saying that the manufacturer in Brazil cancelled their agreement because he said, and we have a copy of the letter, it's all over social media now, that government demanded that they be the only local agent. So the vaccines must come through them. Although we found at least 12 cases where the minister called them by the name, committing that they will be working through these private sector entities. Chris, you know the farmers in South Africa pretty well. You know how much we fear the red tape, the incompetence of the officials in that department.
Yes, I do. Unfortunately, Theo, thankfully, I'm not a farmer right now in that situation. I can only imagine what they're going through here. So let's try to talk about a solution here. Let's pretend that somehow the vaccine is all available to vaccinate the entire herd, 17 million or something like that, or whatever the total figure is in South Africa these days. That's not going to solve the issue with wildlife. Wildlife are still going to have this, so you're going to have to continue the vaccine campaign until it burns itself out and then hope it goes away. But the international standard for veterinarians is 200 to 400 per million population. South Africa only has 60 or 70 veterinarians for that same million. So you're talking a few thousand veterinarians. But let's say you can mobilize one, because not all of them. Some of them take care of cats and dogs, lizards. They're not just for livestock. But let's say you can mobilize 1,000 veterinarians. I would think that they could probably, with a team themselves, vaccinate a few hundred cattle per day at a minimum. It doesn't take that long. You herd them, you run them through. You would think that if you did this, you could get everything vaccinated in the country within a matter of days or a few weeks and put a cold stop to this. Am I just living in the fantasy world, or does that seem like a possibility if only those resources were freed up?
Yeah, we do not have 1,000 veterinarians who can do this. We have a network of veterinarians, private veterinarians, which we will be lucky if we can mobilize 300 of them in the rural areas. But they are quite experienced in this battle. Remember, we've lived with this disease being endemic to the Limpopo and Mpumalanga KZN, where all the provinces where we have a part of the Kruger National Park, or the borders with Mozambique and with Zimbabwe. And we believe it can be done with that network if we have a free flow of these vaccines. The problem is that there has been no agreement with this network of veterinarians, just like there was no agreement with the local agents for the Turkish or the Brazilian vaccines, and all of a sudden they've been pushed out of the value chain. Until there is a proper agreement in place, we're not so sure that government is going to allow the private sector veterinarians to get involved. This is why my organization, SAI, along with Sake Liga and Free State Agriculture, are bringing this request for clarity to the court. We want the court to tell us, why can't we have more private sector involvement in this process? And the answer up to now from the ministry was that it is because the World Organization for Animal Health doesn't allow it. But they allowed it in Brazil. If it is beyond the rules to allow for private sector intervention, why has the minister allowed the RMIS and the Milk Producers Organization to buy the vaccines? Why did they allow them to keep it in their cool storage facilities and have their veterinarians to apply it? So he already broke the rules then. We see it as a very cheap effort to bring in tenderpreneurs who have stars in their eyes of making big money from at least about 25 to 28 million doses that needs to apply to the cattle in the next 2 years.
Well, Theo, I mean, from a practical standpoint, and let me step back and pretend I have no farming experience. So I'll just do that for a moment. But gee, for the layperson out there, see, South Africa breaks the rules. I mean, the government allows defense firms to ship helicopters, combat helicopters, to sanction warlords in eastern Libya and Benghazi in violation of UN sanctions. They allow South Africans to be recruited to be involved in illegal conflict in Ukraine, murdering Ukrainians, Russian mercenaries. They invite terrorist sponsors and terror-designated groups to participate in naval exercises, and there are no consequences for South Africa. So why the heck would they be concerned about the World Animal Organization? Who's even heard of that? I mean, just get it done. I mean, it sounds to me like a pretty mealy-mouthed excuse, especially since Brazil has already set the standard of just wiping this disease out. I mean, again, am I missing something here, or am I just being cheeky?
You are thinking like the majority of farmers are thinking here, Chris. The farmers say, in a country where the president, as the commander of the defense force, gave an explicit order that Iran should not be part of a naval exercise. And he gave it also via the Minister of Defense, and still it happened. How do we know that the minister from a different political party has the command and control over the officials he inherited to ensure the maximum efficiency in combating this disease? How do we know that he has that kind of control? Why would he be protecting them instead of protecting the interest of the farmers? So you are putting your finger right on the spot when you ask this kind of questions. The farmers out there they find themselves between a rock and a hard place. Because if you comply to the rules, if you are a good boy and you keep to the what's required from you by the law, and you report an outbreak, they are going to put you under quarantine for 14 months. And you know that you will not survive this financially. If you keep quiet and you break all the rules, you have a chance to survive. So how many farmers would stick to the rules? And we are saying to them, there's no way we can advise you to break the rules, because we know nobody is going to pat you on the shoulder and even thank you for that. We need to find better ways, and the best way is to get the government to say, controlling this disease means that we will monitor everything in the value chain, but we will remove all the obstacles that makes this route between the manufacturer and the cattle on the farms any longer and more expensive. And we are pushing very hard, ourselves and a number of other organizations are pushing very hard to open up this shortest route, knowing that the shortest and the cheapest route is in this case a private route and not the state.
So, Theo, let's talk brass tacks beyond the farming community. We're going to come back to the farming community in a few moments, but let's talk brass tacks about the reality, the impact on everyday South Africans who aren't in the agriculture sector. Beef and lamb prices have been soaring, have they not? In addition to that, you've got a situation where your exports are cratering. You can't ship a meat out of the country now because of this, if I'm not mistaken. If I am, please correct me. But the consumer is paying out the nose. And the impact of that down the road is for poor South Africans. If they aren't able to access beef or lamb at a reasonable price, that's a source of protein, particularly if they have children under the age of 5. We already know that stunting is a major issue in Africa and also in South Africa, sadly, in which children under the age of 5 receive insufficient protein. Now, there's other sorts of protein, soy, but most South Africans aren't eating soy or it's available to them, and poultry. But the reality here is a lot of people get their protein from beef, or from milk. And so the question here is that these are tangible impacts that are affecting all South Africans. Is that correct?
For sure. It affects your more affluent consumers who are taking the prime cuts from the carcass. It impacts on those who rely on the fifth quarter, which is a popular thing in South Africa, especially in the townships, the head, the offal, but also on the smallholders. You have seen how in South Africa cattle is a bank for the unbankable. It is what you quickly sell to pay school fees if you do not qualify to open a bank account. This is a cultural asset. This is what you pay for a bride. This is what you take to a funeral. This is what you take to a family gathering. So the cattle is much more than just an economic asset. So it impacts from the most affluent parts of society to the poorest parts of society, and everybody feel it in their pockets now. You must also understand the mentality of the communal farmers, those who live in the deep rural areas, the smallest of the smallholders. They know that should they report anything, they might now lose their cattle. So why would they? They know that the state must now vaccinate their cattle. But no state veterinarian is going to run through the bushes to catch these cattle. How will they round them up? There are no cattle handling facilities in the deep rural areas. So without proper support and buy-in from those cattle owners, it is impossible to vaccinate the whole national herd. And I'm afraid the only thing worse than the central control by government is the communication by government at this stage. They do not even communicate properly to the commercial farmers what to say to these farmers in the deep rural areas who own 1, 2, or 3 head of cattle each.
Well, you touched an aspect there that I didn't include, and I appreciate doing that. And that's one that a lot of people outside Africa don't understand. Since I have an international audience, we'll touch on that for a moment. You talked about the cultural aspects, that cattle are much more than simply an economic resource. They're part of culture, deeply embedded, particularly in the Nguni-speaking peoples and the Khoi in southern Africa. For instance, you mentioned bride wealth or lobola. And, I know that in today's world, some people are urban dwellers. They want to hand cash over instead, but that's kind of frowned upon. The norm is that you hand cattle over in order to take a bride, and it's a normal part of culture. But it goes beyond that. This is a devastating thing, not just economically and politically, but also culturally. This could devastate communities and alter cultural traditions that date back thousands of years if all the cattle are lost to this. And gosh, it looks like that could be the outcome, the way this is going.
One of our members in the Limpopo called 2 weeks ago. I've met him at a few of our farmers' days before, saying to me, you've met my bride-to-be, and I've been saving for lobola, and I must pay it towards the end of this year. But now I have foot and mouth, and they would not allow me to transport this cattle to my new family-in-law. So what am I supposed to do? Must I postpone my wedding? So I'm not going to do that. And this is what I'm saying, to do the communication, to sell it, to win the hearts and minds of the people who really matter, the owners of the livestock, will take much more than what we have seen coming forth from this department up to now.
Now, for the Americans that watch the program, of course, might be familiar with some of our cattle, Charolais, which come from France, Herefords and Black Angus, among other breeds of cattle. But South Africa has some unique breeds that are specially adapted to the environment that are well known. The Nguni breed, as well as you've got like the Boer goat, which is well known and well respected. Are these breeds in serious danger of being eviscerated or maybe even possibly eliminated? I don't want to sound alarmist, but that sounds like a serious concern that one might want to take a look at given what's happening.
Chris, we are doing the research right now. We are working with some of the other commodity organizations to gather the data, but up to now, it seems that our indigenous breeds, also the Tuli, the Afrikaner, the Boervelder, the Bonsmara, the Drakensberger, they seem to be more hardened against this disease. Oh yes, they get it, and they look pretty bad at first, and then they recover again, and we do not lose that many of them. We lose a few of the smaller calves. But it is these breeds that comes from Europe and also the dairy cattle that seems to be very vulnerable. It really causes havoc in dairies. This is where farmers shoot 300, 400 cattle a day because they can no longer walk and they can no longer eat or drink water.
Well, and that turns this back to the nature of the disease itself, which many people aren't familiar with. It's a pretty horrific disease for what it does to the livestock. But fortunately, at least at the moment, it's not one of those, when it comes to poultry and swine, there tends to be a lot of zoonotics that jump from those species to human beings. But this doesn't affect human beings, thank goodness, at least maybe in the evolution one day it might, but it's not a zoonotic right now that affects us directly, but it does affect the livestock. And it's quite brutal. I mean, it's painful for this livestock. They suffer a great deal when they contract this disease. Now, I've seen photographs of people showing dairy cattle where the teats are bleeding. Of course, we don't have foot and mouth here, thank goodness, at least I'm not aware of it. So I've not seen that before, but I mean, I'm familiar with the effects of mastitis, which is brutal for dairy cattle. And as a Jersey farmer, this just breaks my heart to see this. I mean, Jerseys are the most adorable, wonderful, docile livestock, and they're so friendly. To see them suffer, but this is a disease that these animals suffer badly, do they not?
Oh yes, the skin comes off the teats. They always get mastitis. We've seen the others exploding afterwards, being swollen up to the point where it can no longer contain the milk. I cannot explain to you what that does to the farmer, especially if it's a third, fourth generation farmer, very proud of his pool of genetics. And this is why we are really concerned about the mental well-being of those farmers who fall victim to it too. And this is why the farmers really have no empathy with the administrative red tape and the administrative bungling in the department and all the petty political excuses that you hear from the department on why we cannot use the shortest route between the manufacturer and the cattle on the farms.
Well, I can understand that entirely, Theo. I mean, look, it's been 4 decades since I was a dairy farmer, and you can see that I'm apoplectic about what's happening in South Africa, thousands of miles away from where I'm at. Just thinking about what's happening to livestock and the livelihoods of people that it's just in their blood. I mean, I just can't imagine the heartbreak that people are going through dealing with this, whether they're, traditional farmers or large scale farmers, particularly dairy farmers. I mean, this has got to be tough. I had a small operation. We didn't have but just a dozen or so head of cattle, so it was a small operation. So I'm more not in the traditional, we farming, but it's small scale, I should say. And I can only imagine when you have hundreds of Holsteins or dozens of Jerseys, hundreds of Jerseys, what you're going through, and just watching this happen. I mean, look, I still remember my first dairy cow that was ever assigned to me, Dolly. She was amazing. She was lovely, and she had a couple of beautiful calves, and I raised those calves and then took them to the fair. This is for people that don't farm, the people that aren't ranchers. I don't think they appreciate, Theo, the connection that people have to the earth, to the land, to their livestock, to their workers. It's truly it's just part of who they are, and it must be heartbreaking. It must be like being stabbed in the chest to have this kind of incompetence or negligence or arrogance or greed or whatever it is that's causing the government of South Africa, the Ministry of Agriculture, to ignore this situation. I can only empathize with these folks and offer hopes and prayers, but I don't know if hope and prayer are going to help at this stage.
You see, look at this thing now through the eyes of those farmers who are affected. They know that foot and mouth is not the most dangerous of the animal diseases we have. As you say, it's not a zoonosis. This disease cannot jump from the cattle to humans, like brucellosis can, like many of the other diseases can. I mean, there are much more dangerous diseases, such as anthrax, such as lumpy skin. And we are being trusted by the state. It's also state-controlled diseases, but we are being trusted to vaccinate our own cattle. So why can't we do it with foot and mouth? Previously, when the law was written in 1984, or the regulations in 1985, the law assumed that we will be working with sick cattle, that when we vaccinate, it will be in areas where we have identified this virus in cattle, and then we vaccinate everything in a 10-kilometer radius from the outside in to clamp it in and to kill it. Then the rules changed when the minister, more than 2 months ago, announced that we will have blanket vaccination of the whole national herd now. All 14 million head of cattle will be vaccinated. Now we are vaccinating healthy animals preventatively. We are vaccinating them to ensure that they would not get the disease, but they are not sick now. So one of the regulations, for example, say that a veterinarian, once he has worked on a farm vaccinating these animals, he's not allowed to get onto another farm in 5 days to prevent him from spreading the disease. But when you are vaccinating healthy animals, that limitation should not be there. You can go to 10 or 12 farms in a day if you can find the time for it. And yet, we do not yet have new regulations. And we cannot understand why farmers cannot themselves handle this vaccine, or even in the presence of one of the private veterinarians, of which at least we have a network across the whole country. And that is why we are pushing also with legal action to get clarity in law. We cannot understand why a minister could not give a simple answer to this question: what in law prohibits us? Show us what. And he says, if you are so certain, why don't you just bring in the vaccines? The reason is because farmers can be arrested. If it is against the law, and he hasn't shown that it's against the law, why take us through that risk? Why not just give a simple answer and say, no, there's nothing in law, or this is the clause in the law on which I rely when I prohibit you from vaccinating it yourselves. We believe that the state should not have the monopoly on handling these vaccines, but they can still control it. And it's really not rocket science to control it. With digital technologies, you can build an app in a day, man, and make sure that you scan a QR code or a barcode, and you take a picture on your mobile phone of the nose of the animal, which is as good as a fingerprint of a human, and you match this ampule with this cow and send it to a central database, and you can monitor exactly what the progress is and where the gaps still are.
Well, Theo, I think that all of that is included in the Cyril Ramaphosa's digital city he promised to build 8 years ago. I think they break ground on that in the year 2096. So if you guys can hold on that long, the fourth industrial revolution is coming to South Africa in the next century, well behind Monaco, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Vietnam. and North Korea even. Actually, so you guys get there after North Korea. So just be patient. It'll get there eventually. Just saying. But, it's these diseases, there are times, and there certainly is a role for the government to play an overarching role to contain things. We had the Mediterranean fruit fly, the medfly, back in California in the 70s, which is devastating. And the state imposed its own quarantines, and you still have that now. If you drive into California, in certain places, they have agricultural stations they check, make you get out and look at you, just like going to across the border in Botswana or traveling in Southern Africa. So there is a role for the state, but it sounds like the state is either uncaring, incompetent, corrupt. When is the last time? Look, you've been very fair. You haven't addressed any particular person or blamed any particular person in this at this stage of the conversation, and I'm not trying to get you to do that. But when's the last competent moment you can recall from the Ministry of Agriculture? Do you recall a competent Ministry of Agriculture that had the concerns of farmers and the country first and foremost? I mean, I'm not an expert in who your ministers have been, so I'm asking honestly, has there been one that maybe we could bring that guy back or that gal back?
Well, we always had better access and a better trust relationship with the second tier of government. You know that I've spent a lifetime in organized agriculture, and I come from the northernmost province in Limpopo. And there were times when we had no access to the MEC for agriculture, but there were also times when we knew we can call her at 2 o'clock in the morning and she will come out and assist. Unfortunately, we cannot determine who gets appointed in those positions, but at least you know that they are there for a limited time. It is these officials, I guess you would call it deep state, these almighty officials who make the calls, who are in control of everything. And if you are not in favor with them, they will not assist you. And those are the ones we fear. We are trying to avoid the vaccines being controlled by them and being, as farmers, delivered to the whims of those officials.
But can South Africa's ranchers and farmers survive until 2029 when there's the next national election?
We're not going to be able to survive to the end of this year, Chris. We need urgent action.
And that's an apolitical statement, I would say, that you've been very fair and not attacked any political party, not attacked any individual. However, I do want to delve into something else. Am I mistaken? I've seen press reports that there is a threat or there is a lawsuit coming from Sakalika and from your organization and some others against either the government or the Ministry of Agriculture to get action on this. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. We have consulted with our lawyers all day long yesterday. We are now gathering affidavits from animal health professionals, from retired government officials, to bring an urgent application in the courts simply to get clarification what in law prohibits us of managing some aspects of this vaccination value chain ourselves. It's because we firmly believe with every cell in our bodies that the government does not have the capacity to pull this thing through on their own. And if we allow them, they will bring in all these tenderpreneurs to prolong the value chain and to make it more expensive. And in trying to avoid that, we must ensure that private sector plays more than just a servant role, that they are appointed as equal partners with the state and that they handle the vaccines. We are very serious of pushing government to ensure the shortest route between the manufacturer and our cattle.
So, Theo, not to put a damper on your mood, and I apologize if I do, but if one looks at this objectively, if you look at 1994, there were 68 to 72,000 commercial farmers in South Africa. I believe you would consider yourself a commercial farmer. Is that a fair statement?
I am.
Okay, so you're not a communal farmer, you're a commercial farmer. As a commercial farmer in South Africa, I'm sure you've noticed the past 30 or 40 years how agriculture has become more commercialized, more industrialized, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, but also in places like Brazil, even in Africa. The Chinese have leased 100,000 hectare farms, and they've hired Zimbabweans to run them for them in Tanzania, among other places. So while the world is going to larger industrialization and commercialized farms, South Africa's commercial farmers have dwindled from 68 to 72,000 30 years ago to maybe 28 to 32,000 today. I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but Theo, it looks like you are a disappearing culture group. You're vanishing from the face of the earth. Is there any concern amongst farmers? I mean, between the multiple threats that you face, whether you're black, brown, or white, you have faced threats of land occupation, expropriation without compensation, banks that don't give you money because you're not certified as a BEE operation, and now you've got this heartless, it appears heartless government that doesn't seem to give a flying flip about the agriculture sector. I mean, Theo, I don't want to come back and talk you. I want to come back in 30 years. I'd like to be around in 30 years, but I don't want to come back in 30 years and find out that, you had to move to go live in a flat in an urban area because all the farms are gone. But by then, they'll probably be the Chinese running them. But I mean, it looks like you, whether you're an Afrikaner or you're a Xhosa or you're a Sotho or a Tswana farmer, as a commercial farmer, you're disappearing right in front of us.
This is the raison d'etre of our organization. This is our reason for being. We are a network for family farmers. And you're so right that all over the world, bigger farmers are growing bigger and bigger, and smaller farmers are dropping out of the industry. And it ends up like playing Monopoly. At the end, only one or two will play, and the rest will have dropped out. Already we see in large parts of the world that corporate farmers and even multinational corporations are taking over primary production. I look at the Midwest of the USA. I look at 3 million hectares bought by Bill Gates. We look at the agricultural model of the Ukraine. And the sole purpose of my organization, SAI, is to help family farmers to survive. That is typically your smaller to medium scale farmer. Now, many people say to me, only this week I heard again from a German visitor, that this is like trying to block the waves of the sea with your bare fingers. You will drown. You are working against massive tendencies across the globe. But we believe we can block it. If enough of us stand together, shoulder to shoulder, we can block it. And we are working closely together with similar organizations like in the United States, Farm Bureau, National Farmers Union, US Farmers and Ranchers. They are in the front trenches fighting against the corporatization of primary production and the centralization of capital and power in our value chains. Federated Farmers in New Zealand, National Farmers Union in the UK, Deutsche Bauernverband in Germany. We are hell-bent to ensure that our food systems remain in the hands of real family farmers, like it have been for 11,000 years. But that needs a coordinated effort to push back. Not one of our organization will be able to do it on our own. We need an international pushback on it. And this is why we were so excited when in 2019, we managed to sell this idea to the UN, and they declared the decade between 2019 and 2029 as the decade for family farmers. It's not only about the ownership and the management of farms. It's also about a life outside the urban areas. We are fighting for an opportunity for a new generation of bright young minds to choose against urbanization, to choose the life in the rural areas. And not only on farms, also in small towns, because small towns only exist when there are enough family farmers around them to keep primary schools' doors open, to keep the churches' doors open, to keep the cooperatives' doors open. Because when big corporates start to farm, they don't use the local lawyer or the local bookkeeper, accountant, or the local agent for fertilizer or agrochemicals, they go directly to the manufacturers and they take their business to the cities. We are fighting for a new opportunity in the rural parts of the world, to lure the brighter young minds to choose life in the rural areas.
It's ironic, Theo, because South Africans want to farm, black, white, and brown. A few more things before we wrap up. A big program that brings a lot of South Africans to America, not the refugee program, but the H-2A visa program, short-term seasonal workers. And we're talking about large industrial commercial farms. I mean, the special that Rian van Heerden filmed called Belofteland, The Promised Land, which I will be appearing in next week's episode, by the way. There's a shameless self-promotion plug right there. Hopefully I come off well. I haven't seen it yet, so fingers crossed. Or as we say,
we'll watch out for you.
As we say in German, ich drücke die Daumen, and hopefully that I look good on camera there. But so H2A, that's a big part of this industrialization. We see that, and they want to actually farm. And they have to come to America to do it. It's really sad. But let me shift to something else, and this is earth-shattering in some respects, but something I predicted, even though just a few weeks ago he announced the contrary. But a few hours ago, sources all over have been reporting now in the media that John Steenhuisen will step down as leader of the Democratic Alliance. He will not seek re-election, which is a shocking development for many people, but not to me. Now, we haven't talked about Minister Steenhuisen in this conversation, but I presume he would stay on as the Minister of Agriculture unless and until the time that the sitting president, which is Ramaphosa at the moment, would no longer want him there. So even though he's not seeking leadership of the Democratic Alliance anymore, he's going to stay as Minister of Agriculture. Had you heard about this story already?
I've heard about it shortly before I got onto your program this afternoon, Chris. It's breaking news. It's brand new. And of course, in my organization, we have members who are supporting at least 6 political parties, which we know of, and we don't ask our members, who are you voting for? But we have, as an organization, assisted in the policy development on agriculture of the ACDP, the Christian Party, Action SA. We frequently give policy advice to at least 2 other parties. We have wrestled policy issues with the ANC, and we have members who we know are supporters of the ANC, especially in Limpopo and Mpumalanga, amongst our black members. So we dare not get involved in party politics. That's just the soonest I will see my head rolling if we get involved into party politics. But what I can tell you is that policy-wise, we have clashed for the first time with the DA since Minister Steenhuisen took office. We wrote several letters to the party asking for an opportunity to discuss with him these policies. One of the policies, of course, the newly published policy on meat analogs, fake meat, where under Minister Steenhuisen's watch, regulations have been published that lab-grown alternatives, plant-based alternatives, and insect-based alternatives can be labeled as biltong, droewors, chops, steaks, and it can be put in the shelves and shops next to real meat. Now, we are up in arms, and our farming members who are livestock farmers, they are up in arms about it. They say they have not been consulted, and they are poking us all the time to fight this kind of regulations. And we can just assume that it is in line with the policies of the DA. We want to wrestle them on these policies. But it's not the only thing. Over the weekend, we saw in the Government Gazette the publishing of regulations restricting the export of agricultural products to the European Union to those farmers who qualify in terms of Black economic empowerment. Now, how do you BEE a family farm? What must a family do to be BEE compliant? Must my daughter now marry a Black person, or my son? it is absurd. And we are shocked by the fact that a DA minister allowed this previously when it happened a year ago, and both Sakeliga and ourselves challenged him. He said, but this is muscle memory. It came out of his department, but it was not of his doing. But it can no longer be muscle memory now. Also on our strategic plan for agriculture, our 30-year plan on agriculture called the AAMP, the Agricultural Agricultural Processing Master Plan. We rejected that plan for the simple reason that you will find the word transformation 92 times in that document. But not once will you read anything about the profitability of our farms or the sustainability of our farms. And we say transformation cannot be more important than profitability. It is because transformation was more important than profitability that Denel is where it is today, and that the SABC is where it is today. It cannot be more important than sustainability. This is why Eskom landed up in giving us load shedding for how many years? If you want to transform water into wine, you first need water. First get our farms profitable and sustainable before you talk about transformation initiatives. Now, the DA was on our side on this. They actually quoted the SAI position, my organization's position, in their reply to the budget speech where a previous minister announced the signing off on this master plan. But since we have a DA minister, he turned around and he said now that he's going to implement this master plan. And we don't know where the policy change came in. So as an organization, we are pushing the DA for sticking to their policies, as it were, prior to the elections of 2024.
So, Theo, I appreciate the apolitical approach that SAAI takes. That's amazing. It's great to hear. And I also appreciate the frustrations. So you don't need to comment on this, but I'm going to comment on this myself, because it's not just an interview, it's a conversation. I'm going to say this. Look, I don't hold out much hope regarding that. I mean, that political party drew a line in the sand for expropriation without compensation, for the Basic Education Laws Amendment Act, for the Employment Equity Act, also for national health insurance. And they didn't really draw a line in the sand, but they should have drawn a line in the sand on the transformation fund that's racist and exclusive for black entrepreneurs and no other South Africans. So that party has not really done much of anything since they joined this government of national unity. So you don't need to comment on that. I'm not trying to drag your organization into that, but just for my viewers, and that's not anti-democratic alliance. That's a statement of fact, ladies and gentlemen. Please show me what they've done. Oh, we're going to court. Well, where are these court cases at? We're now talking a year since expropriation without compensation was signed, famously by Cyril Ramaphosa at Davos, but of course that was a lie. He signed it 34 days prior, which prevented members of parliament from achieving a 33% of the parliament to sign an appeal to go to the Constitutional Court, the Concord, so which could have overturned that law within 30 days. Anyway, the point is that that's just not happening. But listen, Theo, I got to tell you, I'm not too excited about grasshopper, biltong, and droevos. That ain't going to cut it for me, brother. I mean, it just ain't going to happen. And plant-based burgers. I'm sorry, the Mick, I don't know, Mick alfalfa, whatever it's going to be called. I'll take the big hard pass on that. I'm sure some people like that, but that's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah, to come back to the politics, Chris, I will really fail a large part of our membership and our partners if I do not say to you that we have members in Parliament under the DA banner who are doing more than their part to fight for the rights and the interests and the values of the farmers. And not only in Parliament, also on second tier of government, especially on second and third tier of government. If something seriously happens and I need to call somebody late at night, some of the first people that comes to my mind would be DA policymakers on second and third tier of government. The DA is a very broad church, as is the ANC. And maybe not all of them belong together. For example, when a previous Minister of Environmental Affairs was sacked, Dion George, from our organization, in terms of policy, we welcomed it because we believe in the hunting industry. We believe hunting saves species. And he was anti-trophy hunting, and he tried to close the private breeding of lions. But we are seeing lions going extinct in state-owned conservancies because of tuberculosis. You want to save an endangered species? Give it a commercial value, and we will farm it out of endangerment. It happened with the swart witpens, the sable antelope. It happened with the roan, the Buster Gemsbok. You want to save the rhinos? Allow us to sell their horns, to farm those horns. Because if you cut it, it grows back in about 2 years. We must kill the market in order to get rid of the smugglers, the poachers. And the previous minister simply had a different approach to this. So we challenged the DA on the policies on environmental affairs, and the new Minister for Environmental Affairs, Willie Oukamp, he comes from a farming background himself, and he has some experience in wildlife ranching himself. Hence, we believe that we might see better policies coming forward from there too. But for us as a farmers organization, our main calling, our main purpose in life is to do advocacy. We must try to influence policies. But to influence policies, you need to have policies. And we are working very hard to get mandates to develop these policies all the time. The reason why we have a number of different farmers organizations in South Africa, like in the USA, is not all farmers are in agreement with policies. We have different policies. Size policies differ from the policies of Agri South Africa, for example, especially when it comes to centralized control over vaccines in foot and mouth. Their mandate is to support the centralization, and our mandate is to fight against centralization. Their mandate is not to rock the boat around kill the farmer, kill the boer, or farm murders. And our members are pushing us to make the world know what danger these kill the farmer, kill the boer slogans are for us on our farms. But then you need policy certainty with government and with the different political parties too. So we are missing the opposition under the Government for National Unity. Typically, in the Department of Agriculture, where we differ now with certain policies such as centralization in the foot and mouth control, the ANC will not ask the difficult questions in Parliament because they appointed the officials who benefit from it. The DA will not criticize their own minister in there. So who should ask all these critical questions? The Government of National Unity is a wonderful thing. We are grateful that we have that. It's a big game changer after 30 years of ANC rule. But we now miss an opposition voice in Parliament.
Well, Theo, you mentioned Agri SA. I don't really recall them actually being very vocal over the past number of years regarding plasmode. I don't really see much discussion of that, and they seem to be rather quiet in this discussion. I've not heard much from them. It's another organization. I'm not trying to get you to argue with them or raise that issue, but they do seem to be rather quiet on this at a time that they should be quite vocal, in my view, if they're stand up for farmers. But one of my viewers asked early in the program, to get a little bit away from the political aspect of what's going on, about nano silver. Is this a vaccine? Do you know anything about nano silver? What is this? Do you know about it?
Yeah, we've read a lot about it on social media as an alternative to vaccines, but we are still waiting for the science behind it. We dare not recommend to our members to use something and then it turns out not to be working. So after we've read about it, we have distributed this amongst our scientific committee and the private veterinarians, and the jury is still out on how helpful it would be. There are people who are swearing by it, and then there are those who say, no, it is not working. So at the end, the science must have the final say.
So it's not something that's really has been proven effectively at this point that you know of. It's still potentially something that's out there, but it's not a silver bullet, at least at this moment.
No, we are still waiting for the scientific results.
Well, that's fair. Listen, Theo, I've got to say it's always great to have you in the program. Also great to have a coffee with you. It's been a while since we had a chance to sit down and have a coffee. Even though I don't drink coffee, I will drink a cappuccino with you. But I kind of miss that. But I have to say that, listen, I promise you that in any future conversations or any photographs we take together, I will never erase you from the photograph. I just thought I thought I'd let you know that, okay?
I'll keep you to your promise.
Okay, inside joke for those who follow events. But any big things coming along the pipeline away from the foot and mouth disease, just while I got you on camera here, for SAI, things you're involved in? You talk about the family farm. Any big initiatives you guys are working on right now that people might want to be aware of, or is the big focus this foot and mouth disease?
Well, that's the biggest focus at the moment. Of course, we are also busy with our members in Zimbabwe to wrestle the issue of compensation. And in the next 10 days or so, we hope to have a webinar with the Hudson Institute in Washington on the future of USA-Zimbabwe relations, especially when it comes to the sanctions there and the possible compensation of farmers. It can unlock the wealth of that country if we can bring finality to the compensation. And then, of course, later this year, we will see the G20 in the USA. And although South Africa is excluded from it, we had our own farmers G20 last year in September. And we had the USA farmers joining both digitally and in person, and also from the embassy. And we had a different result than the ministers meeting, the ministers of agriculture meeting at the G20. So we believe that we have laid a solid foundation for the G20 farmers discussions in the USA this year, and we are looking forward to it, especially when it comes to these global issues, such as the pressure on animal-based proteins, such as the future of family farmers. These stuff which we can really only wrestle as a global collective. And then you remember our Lamb Champs program, where we try to introduce urban consumers to the producers themselves by putting 150 sheep on a spit and telling consumers in the cities, meet the farmer behind the mutton you eat. Now, this year, we will go bigger than ever before and wider. And we will also internationalize it. We have now challenged the New Zealand farmers to have a taste competition. And it will probably coincide with one of the test matches. Now, if you plan to come to South Africa, Chris, plan it around that time.
Well, if I come, I won't be coming to DHL Greenpoint Stadium for the All Blacks match, because the moment that it opened, every single ticket was gone, which makes me scratch my head about whether something untoward is happening with ticket sales. There are still tickets available at Loftus. There are tickets available at Ellis Park and also at Kings Park. But the DHL Greenpoint Stadium, all of the 52,000 or 55,000 seats were gone literally within seconds, which makes me scratch my head about who got those seats. But yeah, and also I guess if you want to watch provincial teams play, the club teams. You can still get tickets against the Bulls, I believe, and the Lions. So, but yeah, this is amazing. Let's just for a second before we wrap up, we got to turn our attention to this. This is exciting. I mean, look, I like the Tri-Nations. I miss the Tri-Nations. The Rugby Championship is fine. I like it. But we have the All Blacks coming to South Africa on tour. We haven't seen this since, I think, before the apartheid era ended. It's been decades since this sort of thing has happened, or am I mistaken? But whatever the case is, this is exciting. And not only that, this All Blacks tour isn't just South Africa. There's a match in Baltimore, and I do have a ticket for that one on the 13th of September.
Yeah, you are right that all the tickets are already sold out. But in organized agriculture, at least we know the people who bought it.
So all right. So are you saying I have an illicit connection here? Maybe I could get into one of these games. All right. So look, I promised not to cut you out any photographs. Now you have to promise to get me a ticket. All right, Theo, let me give you the last word here as we wrap up. I've got to do production on Steenhuisen not standing for re-election before my news program, and you've got other things to do. So thank you for your time. Very gracious of you today. Always a pleasure. Any final thoughts about the foot and mouth or about anything you want to share with folks? The floor is yours, sir.
Yes, we are not the first country to go through this. Actually, we only need now to vaccinate 14 million head of cattle. The Brazilian farmers got the better of this virus. And if they could have done it, surely we could also do it, because they had to vaccinate nearly 300 million cattle. So there is a light in the tunnel. We must just create a policy environment to make it possible to utilize our whole capacity to throw against this virus. And I'm pretty sure that we will get it done. The battle is not against the virus now. The battle is now against the policymakers to create the environment in which we can win the war against the virus.
Well, that's excellent commentary, Theo de Jager. Thank you so much for your time. It's always a pleasure. And the answer there, I guess, is to fight the policy. The policy is what's causing the problem at this stage. The disease is there. You just got to attack and need the right policy. Theo, thank you very much, and I wish you best of luck in this situation. We'll keep a close eye on it. We'll get you back on if we have more developments.
Thank you, and thank you for the privilege of sharing your platform again.
It's always my pleasure. Folks, Theo de Jager from SAAI in South Africa. I'll let you drop off, and I'll wrap up the stream after this. You have a good day. All right? So there you go, folks. I hope that was informative and helpful. Always a great guest to have on the program. Oh, he's got himself out. Okay, so thank you for being here. Be sure to hit the like button. Be prepared, because I didn't have time. I was prepping for this interview to do a Steenhuisen not running for re-election video, but I'll do that in just a couple minutes. It'll be loaded up before the top of the hour, and then my news at the top of the hour, and I'll lead with that story. That's the huge story here, that John Steenhuisen will not be seeking re-election. He's supposed to be giving a press conference, or at least announcing this tomorrow, the party, or he will be doing that. So I presume he'll remain as a member of parliament and as the Minister of Agriculture, at least for the foreseeable future. And we'll see what happens there. Thank you all so much. Be sure to hit that like button if you haven't done it already. Feel free to leave a comment behind if you're a cogent, lucid, objective adult. But if you're a child, a man-child, or otherwise, you can keep your comments to yourself. Thanks a lot, everybody. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure. We'll catch you here shortly with a prepared video about John Steenhuisen not seeking re-election, and also the news at the top of the hour coming up in this next hour, 6 p.m. South Africa time, 11 Eastern Standard Time here in the East Coast of the United States. You guys take care. God bless, and thank you all for being here. It's always a pleasure. And gosh, things are looking kind of grim in South Africa when it comes to foot and mouth. Let's hope that the tide can be turned. Cheers.